I grew up in a house full of glass. Not the kind you could look through, but the kind that reflected only what people wanted to see. On the hallway wall, in a tall wooden cabinet with glass doors, stood the trophies. Polished to a mirror shine. Football, track, debate, every medal labeled neatly with my brother's name. He had a gift for being remembered. I had a gift for noticing the things no one else saw. From an early age, my brother Ryan was the golden boy. Coach's favorite, principal's pride, neighborhood legend, and my family, we became supporting characters in his story. I watched him claim victories that weren't entirely his. The science fair project that I built with my own hands, the charity fundraiser I organized that won him the community award, the debate championship he barely attended, all of it filed under Ryan. I said nothing, not at first. Silence was easier than arguing. Silence kept the house from cracking under the weight of pride and pretense. But as the trophies piled up, so did the resentment. I began keeping my own records, not in polished cabinets, but in notebooks tucked away in drawers. I wrote down the true story behind each achievement, who really labored, who stayed up all night, whose ideas had been stolen. I didn't share it with anyone. Not yet. The first time I tested my quiet strategy, it was at the local community award ceremony. Ryan stood at the podium, flashing his practiced grin. "It's an honor," he said, as applause rolled through the hall. I sat in the back, watching, notebook in my lap. Each fact I had recorded flickered in my mind. Each unnoticed contribution, each quiet labor, each unseen hand that had shaped his success. I wrote them down again. One by one, in neat, precise columns, it was my ledger, my witness, my weapon. The second time, I let the story slip casually at dinner. "Remember that fundraiser for the library? I think we raised more money than anyone realized," I said. He smiled, confident, unaware. "Of course. I ran it," he replied. I nodded. "Well, you helped, but the total came from the kids in the after-school program I coordinated." He didn't respond. His gaze flicked toward the trophies. I imagined the shine dulling just a little, and that was how it began. I didn't yell. I didn't expose him outright. I simply whispered the truth. Quietly, relentlessly. Every award, every accolade, every photograph with him at the center, each would lose its gleam if you knew the whole story, and I would make sure people knew. Eventually. The first part of my plan wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fiery. It was observation, recording, revealing the small cracks that made even the brightest shine unstable. Because trophies, like all lies, only look solid from the outside. It started small. At the community center, I began asking questions that no one expected. Not confrontational, not accusatory, just casual curiosity. "Oh, Ryan won the award for the debate team again?" I asked a neighbor. "Yes," she said. "But didn't the team actually vote for someone else last year?" Her eyebrows furrowed. She wasn't sure. I didn't have to say more. A seed had been planted. At family gatherings, I slipped stories into conversation. Stories about late nights, unseen efforts, overlooked victories. I remember helping him prep the science fair project. He may have presented it, but I built half the experiment. Faces shifted. Smiles faltered. A few eyebrows rose. Ryan, of course, pretended not to notice. But I could see it. The slight twitch of his jaw, the edge in his otherwise polished smile. At school and in town, the rumor mill began to stir. A teacher I'd once helped as a student emailed me quietly. "I always wondered, who really led the team that year?" I replied carefully, offering documentation, photos, evidence of overlooked contributions. The trophies still stood in his room, but their reflection was no longer perfect. Each accolade carried a whisper. Not everything is as it seems. I didn't attack him directly. That would have been obvious. Instead, I created a network of subtle truths. I reached out to former teammates, the kids from the library fundraiser, the volunteers at the track meets. I asked them questions, gently, almost as if I were merely curious. Their memories were sharp, their voices mattered, and gradually, the narrative shifted. One day, Ryan held a small gathering to celebrate another award. Everyone clapped for him as expected. but I noticed hesitation in their faces, questions in their eyes, murmurs behind cupped hands. He smiled, tried to maintain his shine, but the cracks were visible now. No one could name them all, but everyone felt them. I recorded everything, of course. Every small contradiction, every story, every eyewitness memory. It wasn't a crusade. It wasn't hatred. It was reclamation. By the end of the week, his trophies began to lose their luster, not physically, but in the minds of those who once revered them blindly. The debate championship? People began recalling who really wrote the speeches. The charity award? The volunteers whispered about who organized everything behind the scenes. I didn't need to shout. The shine dimmed on its own. Every night, I updated my ledger. Trophy, evidence, witness, status. The word status was the most satisfying. Slowly, inevitably, it moved from untouched to questioned. And as it shifted, I realized something important. This wasn't just about him. It was about reclaiming my place in a story where I'd been erased. It wasn't enough for the trophies to lose their shine in private conversations. I needed him to see it. The first step was subtle, a photo display at the local library. I curated images from school events, fundraisers, and competitions, photos showing hands that weren't his shaping the outcomes. My handwriting noted the contributors in fine print, almost imperceptible at first glance. Ryan came to the library one afternoon to pick up a donation he'd made. He paused at the display. His eyes flicked to the tiny annotations. I watched him from a distance, carefully pretending to browse the shelves. He frowned. His pride, polished for so long, began to wobble. He didn't know how much the public had started noticing, but the mirror had been held up. Next, I used social media. Not to attack, not to expose, but to document. I posted photographs of events with captions highlighting overlooked contributors. Team photo, debate champions of 16. Shout out to Jane Doe, whose research made the win possible. The community began to respond. Comments, likes, shares. The tide was subtle, but it moved. Trophies that had once hung like untouchable icons were now floating amidst stories that didn't mention him. The shine couldn't withstand the light. Family gatherings became quieter. People whispered, tentatively, about accomplishments he'd claimed. Friends who once nodded blindly now hesitated, adding small truths to the conversations. I remember who really coached the track team that year. Wasn't it her idea for the fundraiser? Even his closest allies were starting to doubt. Then came the school reunion. Ryan strutted in, perfectly rehearsed smile, pressed suit, trophies in hand. He expected applause. I arrived shortly after, holding nothing but a notebook and a camera. At first, no one noticed me. But when I began to share images and stories from the archives, the ones documenting the actual contributors, the room shifted. Whispers grew. Laughter faltered. Eyes darted between him and the evidence. Ryan tried to maintain composure, tried to charm the crowd, but the mirror reflected every inflated gesture. He looked smaller, shaky, human. That night, I updated the ledger, trophy, evidence, witness, status. Every entry had moved another step, disputed, questioned, verified. The word status now carried weight. I realized something profound. Truth isn't about shouting. It's about letting reality unfold quietly, so that even the most polished image eventually shows the cracks. I didn't stop there. Every week I added more stories, more photographs, more small, undeniable truths. Even the town began to notice the subtle shift. People who once celebrated him uncritically now paused. They questioned. They remembered the people behind the trophies, and Ryan? He couldn't understand it. He tried to polish his smile, clean the trophies, stage victories, but the mirror didn't lie. It reflected him exactly as he was, and everyone else was beginning to see it too. The night of the awards gala arrived. Ryan expected adoration. He had prepared his speech, polished his trophies, and rehearsed every smile. I arrived with only my camera and my ledger. No one knew what I carried, but soon they would. I set up a small display in the back of the hall. Framed photographs, handwritten notes, scanned newspaper clippings, and testimonials from those who had been invisible behind his victories. The first guests noticed the display casually. Then others paused. Whispers began to thread through the room. Wait, she did all this? I thought he... Never mind. By the time Ryan took the stage, the room had shifted. The applause he expected was hesitant, scattered. He glanced at the back of the room. His trophies gleamed in the light, but so did the evidence of his omissions. Every photo, every caption, every note held a mirror up to him. I don't know what this is, he said, voice tight. I stepped forward. This, I said, is the truth. Every achievement you claim has a story behind it, and most of those stories don't include you. The crowd murmured. Some gasped. Others nodded in recognition. Ryan's face turned red. He tried to laugh, to charm, to deflect. But the mirror didn't lie. Every misstep, every borrowed idea, every forgotten hand was visible now. The trophies, the polished symbols of his ego, suddenly looked hollow, empty. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't need to. The room did it for me. Recognition shifted. Credit was returned quietly, almost politely, to those who deserved it. Ryan slumped. Not defeated exactly, not humiliated publicly, but diminished. The glass had shattered, and he could see every fragment reflected back. After the gala, I walked the hall alone. The display remained, a quiet testament. I ran my fingers over the photos of the volunteers, the handwritten notes, the newspaper clippings. For the first time in years, I felt the trophies didn't matter anymore. Not to me, not to the world. At home, I placed the ledger on my desk. I didn't need to write anymore. Every line, every annotation, every small, precise act had been fulfilled. I looked at my own reflection in the window. For once, it wasn't overshadowed by anyone else. Weeks later, Ryan stopped calling. He left the trophies in the cabinet untouched. Somehow, they were still shiny, but no longer glorious. And that was enough. The lesson was simple. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It accumulates. It persists. And eventually, even the brightest shine fades when it rests on a hollow base. I smiled at the trophies one last time. Then I closed the glass doors. For the first time, the reflection in the cabinet wasn't just him. It was me.